Hello and welcome to the Art of Mindful Wealth podcast. I'm your host, Leisa Peterson, and today I am very pleased to introduce you to my guest, George Kinder. I have developed a really great friendship with George after I interviewed him back in the winter of 2016. So you can find that interview if you're inspired by this one. But let's say that George has been deeply inspiring to me. He was one of those people that I admired from afar. I had a mutual friend who introduced us, and since then we've become friends. He is the founder of the Kinder Institute of Life Planning. And why that's so important and why I wanted to share this conversation with you is that George has created a revolutionary way of teaching financial advisors how to help their clients in what I consider one of the most meaningful ways possible, which is to understand their why, to use their money to engage in living their purpose. And what he does is he teaches financial advisors how to do that work and incorporate it into the financial planning, the retirement, all of that, which is just mind-blowing. So he's created a process that he's going to be sharing in this conversation. But because when we get connected, our conversations just immediately dive in, I pressed the record button and started recording this conversation back and forth. So in the beginning, you're just kind of eavesdropping, and slowly I start to ask him more questions about what he does and how he does this meaningful work in the world. George is also a author, a poet, a photographer, a world traveler. He spends parts of his time in Hawaii, in Massachusetts, and also in London during the year. He teaches these incredible workshops all over the world for financial advisors. And he's got some really great books that I know you're going to want to check out on Amazon. I've been inspired by many of them. I continue to read them, and he's got another one coming out at the end of the year, which hopefully I'll be interviewing him again about. So enjoy this conversation. It was deeply inspiring to me. I could talk to George all day long and never get tired of the responses that he shares with us. He's so full of wisdom and just such a good person. So enjoy.
A wonderful saying that Stephen Mitchell, he took it from, there was a great, I'm sure you know his work, but there was a fellow who wrote one poem early in Chinese, just before Buddhism came along. So it was still Taoism, but it was opening to Buddhism, and a wonderful poem. And Stephen Mitchell did a translation of it, or an interpretation in one of his books, coming from Sun Sunim, the Zen master, the Korean Zen master. And what he said is, you take ice cream. He said, it's fine to have preferences. And in Buddhism, we have preferences, but don't be attached to your preferences. That's the trick.
Like,
yeah.
So true. And honestly, talk about a joyful path.
Yeah.
That is a joyful path. When you realize that you don't have to be attached to anything, like including the words that come out of your mouth or anyone else's.
Yeah.
It's pretty freeing. Like,
yeah.
I said it in that moment. I may not agree in a year or a day, or who knows. And I do feel like the people that come and hang out with me, they enjoy that kind of freedom to live.
Great. Lovely. Yeah. Well, wonderful. I wondered where you've been, and I know you have other spiritual paths that you've opened to and everything, but I wondered about the Buddhist. So you're in the new book that I'm writing that is part of this idea in January. There's a whole section of the book. It's one chapter out of 10, but it's a major chapter. And what it does is it takes the map of space and time and it deconstructs it. It says that whole frame of economics, which is self-interest economics. I call it refrigerator economics, because space and time is filled with objects we can accumulate, put in our refrigerator, right? And whoever's got the biggest refrigerator can stuff the most things in wins in the game of money. And what I do is I put in our Buddhist meditation, I put in, well, wait a minute, just on this little plot of land here that I have, in this acre and a half, there's probably close to 1 million ants. There's beetles, there's bees, there's dragonflies, there's butterflies, there's robins, there's great blue herons, there's chipmunks, there's squirrels, there's possum, there's all kinds of fish, and all these creatures, and each one of us has this depth of consciousness that breaks through the grid of time and space into something else. And so the map of time and space and refrigerator economics doesn't work. It leads to war. It leads to inequality. It leads to cynicism and distrust. So here's a new map. So I've got a whole section that takes our meditative understanding and kind of maps it. What would it look like if we could map that into this world? So that's part of what you might be interviewing me around. And then there's politics and democracy and media and all the rest. But it goes that deep, Lisa, the stuff that I'm working on. It's really quite wonderful.
I love it.
Yeah, and then coming back and reflecting on how do we create a great civilization? And starting with the experience you and I have had in the banking crisis and the dishonesty that was there and the troubled lives that people were left with. So looking at how do we create a great civilization that might thrive for hundreds, if not thousands of years? What are all the things that would need to shift? And one of the major ones is the map of economics and the map of space and time, so that we understand the world in a different way. So that's
I love it. It's so interesting because your work, and I know our work collides in different ways. And I started recording, just so you know, because I feel like I'm going to put this together and it's going to be awesome. I'm fascinated by the evolution of the mind, and what causes someone to go from a place of blame and uncertainty and fear to stepping into this place of love and surrender, letting go, trust, and actually feeling that you have the ability to take responsibility for your own life. And that's what matters more than anything else. And so it's interesting. I'm sure these converge in your writings, but I would love it. I would love it if you could, there were two things that came to me. One was like, what's really lighting your boat now? But also you have this organization, and I'm so curious about all of these lives that you're touching in the financial advising space. And it just continues to blow my mind, because most of the time my exposure has been a very different vision of the financial advisor platform. And you see these people that come and find you from all over the world who feel the same call that I think you and I have. And I just feel like if you could share a little bit about those two things, it feels like a great place to start. It might be too much, but.
Well, actually, there's so many different layers to your question, and I hope I do it justice. So I don't know if I will, but I can certainly talk about a number of the things that you're mentioning here. And I don't think as so much, although I don't use the term a lot in my teaching, the term of love and surrender that you use, or even the term of letting go, I mostly try to frame that kind of thinking in terms of what is the financial advisor actually doing in their relationship with their client, and what do they want to accomplish? So it ends up being much the same thing, but without the same language. And the way that I learned to frame, because these do feel like two very, very different worlds, the world of the spirit and the world of financial advice. And too often, just as in the world of the spirit, as we were talking earlier about teachers who violated their students' trust in some way, we know that financial advice is rife with violations of trust. And oftentimes by people who are actually very good people and not meaning to do it at
Totally.
all, but they're just not trained that in fact the key thing is their relationship with, not with money, but with the person that they're in the room with. That's the number one place where they need to go to be great financial advisors. Being a great financial advisor is not about constructing a great portfolio. It's not about knowing it's not about knowing tax strategies. It's not about knowing how to shift things in retirement. It's really knowing who the client is and serving them and bringing all those financial skills to bear on it. But the place it starts is, who is the client? And you can't know the client in the old ways. You can't know them with data gatherers, with questionnaires. You can't know them with numbers. And you short circuit. If you short circuit that knowing, what happens is you're setting up a situation where there is no trust, and where you might be blamed at some point. And you might have been well-meaning, but in fact, the trust level has already been diminished. And if the market collapses, if something doesn't go quite the way you had anticipated or wanted, and the client has a short fuse, you're gone. That's it. So we go back to, what do you really want? And there are two things that the clients want, and you'll love both of these because I know you're very interested in this entrepreneurial world as well. So there are two things that financial advisors want when they come in. One is they want their own lives to be rich and fulfilled. And they also want to find a way to do the same thing for their clients. So before they come in to meet me even, they've got this idea, I think I could do this better. I know I'm doing it wrong somehow. How can we fix it? And so the way that I approach it is not so much with love and surrender and letting go, but that's unconscious to them.
Yes.
They don't realize that's going on. How I approach it is listening. If you want to know your clients, the first thing you have to do is you have to let go of all of your preoccupations. We were just talking about attachments and prejudices, and you have to let go. If you and really give your attention to the client. Well, what's that? I mean, that in therapy terms, that's unconditional love. That's unconditional positive regard. And so that's where you start. And so it's with listening skills. And then what I do, you'll be interested in this as well with your background in meditation, is I go, well, so listening, well, how do we listen? How do you actually start listening? And the answer is that first you have to be able to listen inside yourself. So how do you do that? Well, let's do what I call inner listening. Let's go inside ourselves. Let's close our eyes and go inside. And what I want you to do is actually let go of all the thoughts and listen from a deeper place. And that's the essence of all meditative traditions. So I get financial advisors all over the world to meditate by talking about listening to their clients. And they love it. They really love it.
Yeah. Do most people that come to you, do they start meditating after if they weren't before they found you and they come to workshops, then they see the value?
I don't know if most of them do. I wouldn't be surprised if most of them do. I know that I get email after email saying, if it weren't for you, I never would have meditated. And now I meditate regularly. So I think the numbers are high, but I don't know what the actual numbers are.
Yeah, it's kind of I was writing an email today about meditation because last week, as an empath, I can feel the resistance when I start talking about meditation, because there's a group of people that really like the topic, and there's a lot of people that are like, oh man, she's talking about that again. And I just end up beaten up on myself because I kind of suck at it. And nobody tells me like that it's okay to suck at meditation. So I just don't do it, like,
Yes.
and I tell people it's okay to not be great at it because it takes a while. But how do you deal with that? Because I see that a lot.
Yeah. So a couple of ways. And our programs, our main kind of in-person programs are residential. There's a 2-day program, and then there's a 5-day program. And the 2-day program I just introduced, we do maybe a half hour of meditation over 2 days in 5 to 10 minute batches. So I'm really just introducing it and introducing the concept. But in the 5-day, we do 15 to 20 minutes a day, 20 to 25 minutes a day. And so I'm just assuming that this is what they're there for. So at the end of 5 days, if you meditate every day for 5 days, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, you're beginning to get its value. So one of the things is just getting them to, in that way to do it. And the other thing, one of my teachers used to say that it was a great saying. I love it. I use it all the time. He said, George, a bad meditation is a good meditation.
That's great. It's so true.
Yeah.
I'm writing about this right now because, I've been meditating for all these years. I feel like I've got pretty good prefrontal cortex control.
Yeah.
And somebody sends me an email and it was like, oh, open this app. And then it's a beautiful picture of like the ocean. And it says, don't do anything for 3 minutes, just sit here and meditate. And I was like, piece of cake, So I sit there and I close my eyes, right?
Cool.
And then something comes in, right? And I'm like, oh crap, I didn't take care of that. And I go to type and the thing sends off bells and whistles like you failed. And I was like, okay, so much
great.
for my grandeur
That's
in meditation,
great.
but I'm guessing I'm not the only one. So.
No, and the other thing that I did in the early days, I called it meditation. And when we did the reviews at the end of the 2-day, when the evaluations, it was one of the things that got the lowest evaluation. So I changed the name. I changed it from meditation to inner listening. And the valuations went up significantly just by changing its name. So I call it, in the early days when people don't know me very well, I call it inner listening. And the other thing I use a lot, because it's used a lot in the press, is the term mindfulness. So instead of meditation, just change the language and people are much more accepting of it.
I need to do that more because I totally agree. And even the word guided meditation helps people because they're like, oh, that means I don't have to just sit with me. You're going to take me through it. And so that's been my default. People like listening to my voice. And so I take whatever I can get,
Yeah, great.
But it is fun. And obviously it's life-changing. So there's so many reasons to help people. I mean, did you say, how long have you been engaged in this?
I've been teaching it for 30 years and practicing. And I practice a lot. I probably have averaged 2 to 3 hours a day over almost 50 years. So there was an article in Scientific American talking about how really meditators who've really done it a lot, and they were talking about the top 1/10 of 1%, and they were saying who've done 40,000 hours. And I went back and calculated, and yes, I've done 40,000 hours.
It's like I did it. You get a badge and a card.
Yeah, right.
I want one of those. I continue to amaze myself because I know what my mind was like. And I just did a class the other day and I was trying to help some folks that are trying, but it's not working. And it immediately brought me back to how fast, the mind wants to go doing other things. And then from where I sit, when I meditate now, it brings me joy that it's behaving, Like, it does what I want it to do. I mean, no wonder these people who have achieved incredible success, I mean, like yourself, and brought big dreams into reality, credit this ability to meditate and make it a commitment in their lives. I mean, do you see it? Like, do you see the people you know that have a real committed practice and what happens in their lives as an entrepreneur, for example?
I do. Virtually everybody that I know who has, who I've followed, who I've stayed connected with, and who has a decent practice, a daily practice, let's just say that they have a daily practice, and have continued with their work, their entrepreneurial engagement with the world. The thing that I'm struck by is that each of those people is much more grounded than they were when they first came in to meet me. That they know more who they are, and they know exactly what it is that they want to deliver into the world. And they also feel very connected and deep inside themselves, very self-knowing. So that's a really beautiful thing to see. And that's just with these are people who pretty much just have a daily practice, not necessarily have done major retreats or anything like that, just simply a daily practice. So, and I just read an article from the from the Scientific American, a blog from the Scientific American of a few years ago, talking about how the amygdala, the center in the brain that is filled with our fear and our anxiety, that it actually shrinks. Just simply from, if you just took an 8-week course in meditation, so just did a daily practice for 8 weeks, your amygdala shrinks, and the centers that are actually working with reason and have more spaciousness in them increase. So
That's
so
amazing.
it has a real impact on the brain. And what it was saying about people who practice a lot is that their brains really shift so that they have the brain that someone actually doing a meditation practice has, they have that in their regular life. And that's, I think you can see that in your own life.
Article. Oh, the amygdala shrinking, it's interesting to me because I think one of the things that you and I even talked about in our first conversation or offline is you didn't have a really intense, fearful childhood. Like, that wasn't your story. Like, that was my story. And I think my amygdala was really, really big.
Wow. Wow.
And so it didn't happen in 8 weeks. Like, I wish I would have been that person. It took a long time to shift out of living in fight or flight. I think that was what, in all fairness, this has been a 17, 18-year journey. I think not knowing it then, but looking back, that was all I ever wanted. I wanted to rid myself of the fight or flight response.
Wow, incredible. This article actually talks specifically about fight or flight, and reducing that urge to go in one direction or the other.
It's like possession. Like, I think of The Exorcist, and it's like, that's what it's like to live in a fear-based world.
Wow.
You feel like you don't have control of anything.
Yeah.
And that's not life.
No.
Because I do know what it's like, and so now I see how frequently, and people I think are going to be drawn to me because I have overcome that way of life. Even if I didn't say it, people just feel that that's the work that I'm doing. So I get people who are working through that same journey, and I see the trauma, that they've gone through to arrive at where they're at. And I tend to think of it like when they're finally at the edge of the cliff, and they're like, I'm either going to fly or I'm going to die. That's when they show up on my doorstep. Like, they're like, I can't take it anymore. Like, I'm really serious about this because the work I do helps people, but I don't do it. They do it. I'm just like you, we're facilitating what's so important and meaningful to us. We want to help
Right.
that to other people. But it's fascinating that you mentioned the amygdala, because it did work, and I've never seen a therapist. It's all been through meditation and emotional release, right? Letting go of the baggage so that I could see the other side.
Right.
I wonder, that brings up a good point, because it is a transformative experience for a financial advisor to come and do your courses. And you have a series of courses, right? There's kind of the beginner, and then they can keep going and become more advanced in their skills.
Yep. We have 3 things that are requirements to become a registered life planner. So it gives them a designation. And that includes a 2-day, a 5-day, and then a mentorship for a 6-month mentorship. And then beyond that, we have something called life planning mastery, which is usually done as a day-long, 1 to 4 times a year. And it's where all the fun happens. Because it's people who have put it together, they're doing well, they want to learn new skills, they want to engage with each other in the community. So it's just a fabulous, great community. And usually there are at least a couple of teachers that are there at the same time. And it's a small group, it could be as small as half a dozen, it's as large as 25 or 30. So really quite lovely.
Because this isn't just the mind. This is also the body. This is also this emotional stuff that we hold on to. How does that play out in the work? Do people?
So what the work that we do in terms of kind of the layers of kind of deep work, and the client won't necessarily think of it as deep work. The advisor might not, but if you and I are talking, the first layer is that layer of inner listening. And it's the layer, so in the first meeting with the client, you primarily are just listening. And you're really asking open-ended questions. You aren't revealing a lot about yourself, because everything you reveal about yourself sets up a filter for the client to move around in case whatever you say doesn't relate to them. So it's really asking open-ended questions, being empathic, being connected, but more from the emotions and more from clearly listening, mirroring, appreciating, those kinds of skills. So in that meeting, what happens is that both the client and the advisor meet each other at a deeper and deeper level of trust. The advisor, having gone through this work, knows themselves much better than they knew themselves before they came into it. So they're quite relaxed in all of this. And the client coming in anxious around what this is all about and where they're going to go and what's going to happen with their money, finds a way, just because of the heart-to-heart connection, to settle. And they settle in that place of trust. There are elements there where the fearful childhood might come up, or the aspiration that they long for but have never dared to go for come up. And in both those places, there's either empathy or inspiration that's shared, but it's shared more as an appreciative moment, as something so the client feels very connected with. So in a similar way, in our work with advisors in the training, the advisor's getting life planned as they are learning to life plan. So they are paired up, and they're getting life planned by their own advisor, and they are life planning that person. So there's this dual experience that's occurring. So the first thing is this deepening of trust, this letting go, and beginning to get at what is most profoundly important. And then the second meeting is vision, and it's inspiring, and it's more engaged. The advisor doesn't listen quite as much. They're more engaged with, wow, wouldn't that be wonderful? Or how incredible. Oh, I think you were born to do this. Those kinds of peppering the conversation with appreciations and recognition. And so what happens there is that the client kind of begins to soar. And by the end of the meeting, the client has just taken off into the world. We call it painting the picture. They've begun to paint the picture of what it really looks like. The advisor has taken their turn painting the picture, and then the client does. And it's Valhalla. It's paradise. It's exactly what the client wants in their life, and it's described. And the advisor is saying, "You can have it. Let's make it happen." So we don't. The advisors, they may get nervous at first. Are you going to promise the person more than they can do? Are they going to want to spend all their money? And it's one of the great things working with financial advisors, because we know what the limits of money are. But by and large, people don't want to spend all that money. What they really want is they want a great relationship. They want a great family. They want to have some creativity in their life or in their business. They want to give back to the community in some way. And often there's a layer of values or spirit that's there. And those things don't cost a lot of money. So, occasionally they need a new home, or a home in the country instead of one in the city, or vice versa. Well, you figure out how to work that out. But mostly it's more personal stuff.
Yeah.
So you inspire them, and they're now soaring with excitement. And that's where I think the entrepreneurial energy gets activated. It's in that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So it got established first by the trust, and then it gets inspired. And so the client or the advisor, at the end of being that meeting of being life plan, is ready to go out and change the world. And they're ready to go out and change themselves. They're just inspired to do it. And then the third meeting is more dealing with the obstacles, but that's like, let's get to work. Let's make this happen, And so they're really engaged, as is the advisor. And so that it goes from there.
Yeah.
So that's really what happens.
It's so beautiful. I think of, it's fascinating, right? Because so many times, especially now that I've been coaching businesses more and more, I see how not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, right? Like, you could do financially a lot better working for someone else. Maybe your dreams might not be materialized in the work that you do as much, but I also see that the challenges that people face in becoming an entrepreneur are multifaceted. Like, just to be fair, it's a very complex equation that you have not received a lot of training for when you've worked for other people in the corporate world. And I'm curious, because you obviously have been a life planner to teach this to other people, but how would an advisor help someone who was working through that challenge of being able to encourage, but also help them to make sure that they're talking to some experts that could really guide them to make that decision very holistically?
Yeah. So the one of the terms that I use a lot is freedom. And although not everybody wants or necessarily will be an entrepreneur, everybody wants to have freedom in their life, and to know what it is, to taste it, and regularly on a daily basis. And so one of the purposes of our work is to get people closer to what that taste is, and who they would be if they were to step into that world of freedom. And so many times people who are used to making more money in the corporate world will define something that might include the corporate world, but gives them more freedom. And that piece of what they will do is entrepreneurial. It might not be that they're completely stepping out and becoming an entrepreneur, but there are elements that are entrepreneurial for them. So that's, I think I sidestepped your question a little bit.
I actually love it. I love it because I think what you're pointing out is that there are lots of different ways that people can achieve freedom in their lives. But typically, we think of it as black and white because we live in a world that's very like you're an entrepreneur or you work for others. And the idea that there could be lots of shades of gray in between is what I feel like you're kind of pointing out.
One of my early students who became a trainer in our work and became nearly won the election to be the head of the FPA, Financial Planning Association, was on the board for many years, was stuck in a job working with, I think it was Metropolitan Life, but it was one of the big financial services or insurance companies. And his what came out in his work in that vision meeting was not so much about him as about his family, that he really wanted more than anything to have an extraordinary relationship with his daughter, and a similarly extraordinary relationship with his wife. And the reason that they were verbalized was that at this moment, that wasn't true. That wasn't what was happening. So at this moment, as he was being life planned, he felt very troubled by his relationship with both of these female energies in his life. And so when we came to his work, it turns out that he was working 60 hours a week, and great work. But the company, whatever company it was, loved him. And I said to him, I said, hey, what if we were to reduce your work hours by 15 hours a week, and you were to dedicate that time to your daughter, and maybe some to your wife too, how would that be? And he just lit up, Lisa. He just blossomed, big smile, and he had tears in his eyes, and was almost ashamed to look at me. And now he beamed and said, yes, I could do that. That would work. That would work. So what we did was we had him, so thinking about entrepreneurial, what is it? So what we did was we had him imagine how he could cut back his hours and still deliver just as much to the company, and how he could take those hours and deliver in a different way, entrepreneurially, again, to his daughter and his wife. So that's what he did. And he designed, we participated a bit, but primarily he designed what his work life would be at work. Very different from how it was, with much more support for him. So he wasn't doing all the runaround, all the phone calls, all the emails. He was getting support for a lot of the service. And he managed to deliver to the company just as much value in that next year, but cut back his work by 15, 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
So entrepreneurial, you can do also, it can be intrapreneurial, as they call it in corporate engagement. If you know what freedom is, if you know what it means to you, and you work with someone who cares to deliver that to you, there are ways to make that happen.
Back in December, when I was returning from Hawaii, the spirit there. Like, I don't know about you, actually. It's kind of hard to work there. I was pretty relaxed, and I was like, do I really want to do this business anymore? Do I really have it in me? Because I knew I had a lot of work in front of me, and I was on Hawaii time. So I came back, and as fortune has it, I saw a video from a performance coach, and there were things that he was saying that I'm like, I'm going to have to stretch the bounds of what I'm comfortable with. But there are some things that are really, really important he's talking about that if I don't figure out how to do, I'm never going to have the success in my personal life or in my business life. And it's exactly what you were talking about. And so since December, I've been learning these techniques of time management. And I did it for myself. But what's so funny is as soon as I started it, I was sharing it with my clients, and they were like, well, are you going to teach me that? Right? They're like, you take all the classes and just tell me what I need to do differently. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. So it ended up helping my business too, because I was able to offer more value in not just saying, here's the great idea to do, but breaking it down into small parts so that people don't overwhelm themselves and take on too much, because it's really easy to do. I'm sure you've been on a very interesting journey yourself, because your business took off. It reached a level where you had to find really good people to support you. You know, I'm working into that now, but I just notice every time you kind of up level and you reach a new level, you've got to look at your surroundings and say, what's working here and what isn't working, and do exactly what you said. Because if your goal is truly freedom, which it is for me, then I want to support that with my actions as best as I can.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And in the life planning work that we do, everybody increases the level of freedom that they have. It's not about increasing the level of money, although that may be one of the elements. It's always about increasing the level of freedom. And there are times where in our lives where we need to sacrifice some freedom. You go to graduate school and you have, the work is so compelling and requires so many hours that you have to sacrifice your freedom during that time. But what we try to do in life planning in almost every situation is to give someone an extra at least 5 hours of freedom a week than what they're currently having. And often it's 15 to 20 hours, but at least 5 hours as part of the overall program. So we may be aiming at, a home in the country that they need to work hard for and save for, and it might be 2 or 3 years away, a cabin in the woods someplace for the family to go to. But we don't, by and large, we don't just sacrifice for that. We find some way that they're getting that experience of nature, of the woods, of getting away, virtually every day. So they have some aspect of that that's increased in their life. So that gives them so much more energy to actually deliver on the hard work that's required to make that all work for themselves. So that's one of the themes.
Is there time management strategies? So are these things that they're putting on their calendar, for example? I mean, are there things that you guys are encouraging them to do to make that a reality versus a dream?
Yeah, no, great. And you probably, given what you've just learned, could add some specific strategies and would bring in specific skills if you were working with our methodology. We tend to do it ad hoc. We don't have specific time management trainings that we do, but we hold the client's feet to the fire in terms of in the third meeting, which is the obstacles meeting. We'll go, okay, so now you're going to be meeting with this person about, the coaching that you need to get the business skills that you have. So when is that meeting going to take place? Okay, and I don't know when it's going to take place yet. I don't know who the person's going to be yet. Well, how are you going to find out who that person's going to be? And when are you going to do that work? And we put those on the calendar. So you're talking about really spending some extraordinary time with your wife or your spouse. When are you going to have that conversation with your spouse? And we basically get a huge amount of the work happening in the next couple of days. Certainly within the next week. So if they say, well, I think I could do it by the end of the month. By the end of the month, so you play a little bit hard, hard to get in some way. And so basically we put them right on the calendar, right on time.
That's great. my clients watch all of these things that I put together in these interviews. And so they're going to be like, I want that 5 hours of freedom that George was talking about.
Great.
So I'm with you. I think it's really important, and we're going to
Great.
find a way, because I think it's beautiful, and you do need to follow up with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to take us through the last couple steps of the process? Just
well, the obstacles is probably the main one. After the E for exploration is the trust meeting. V for vision is the second and the inspiring meeting. The third meeting is obstacles. But coming into the obstacles meeting, we ask the client to be to have spent the intervening couple of weeks really painting the picture for themselves of what this new world is going to look like. So you know how you can leave a workshop or you can leave a meeting and you're all on fire, and then the next thing you know, you're getting back to your regular life, and you don't implement. So and one of the things that comes up is all the obstacles. Oh, I can't do that because I got to take the kids to school. I can't do that because I've got to pay the mortgage. I can't do that because that's my parents' weekend. I can't do that, So all these things come up, and suddenly it gets put on hold. And by the time you're ready to do it, many months later, you don't have the energy or the enthusiasm anymore for it. And so you've kind of diminished yourself. So what we do is we ask them in the intervening, in the week between, the 2 weeks between vision and obstacles, we ask people to live into their dream. So park the obstacles on the side. If they want to write them down, fine, but then let them go and just live into the dream. What is it going to really feel like to be that new person, to live with that quality of integrity, to live more in the country, to have a richer family life than they've had, to have a business that's really unusual and thriving? What would it feel like to be in that? And paint the senses for me. So when they come back in, they've really lived in that. And as a consequence, they come into the obstacles meeting, many of the obstacles have been blown away just by that experience. But then we go at the obstacles and we have this time management, task orientation, this quick conversation back and forth, making the plan to make it happen. The fourth meeting, just briefly, there's a fourth and fifth meeting. The fourth meeting, because most of the people are financial planners, is the actual delivery of a financial plan with all the figures and statistics and all of that going out a number of years. And the final meeting is just simply looking at, are there things remaining to execute? It may be executing an estate plan. It may be executing on the investment policy statement. There may be things that have been left out that need to be executed. So that's really the 5-phase process.
It's so funny, right? Because I studied your books for years, and I just loved it to pieces. I didn't have the money to go off to your workshops. Now I'm like, oh, I should have pulled it together. But what's so funny about what you just described is so many overlaps with what I'm doing now in my coaching practice with my clients. And the light bulb hadn't gone on until you walked us through those steps, but they're so true. And I'm taking notes too, because I'm like, oh yeah, I want to go back and look at your process, because how funny is that when we, I think, are looking to serve that highest self of each of us, that
Yes.
we're put on this planet for a reason, that there are amazing things before us and incredible potential and possibilities. Once we believe that for ourselves, then we believe it for everyone. And we do want to do what we can to help them do that. And it's probably no coincidence that there's been that convergence.
That's right. That's right. One of the things we say is that you can't do life planning for your clients until you've been life planned, or at the very least until you are living your life plan. So very important that we do this work inside of ourselves. How could we possibly challenge someone to change their life if we haven't gone through all the doubts and obstacles as to why we can't, and moved through those doubts somehow and claimed our life and our vitality and our entrepreneurial spirit. Claimed that for ourselves. If we do that for ourselves, then we can deliver to anybody.
Wow. That is so cool. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you forever. And I love that I have a podcast and video cast so that I get to talk to you. It's just such a pleasure, George.
Yeah, wonderful, Lisa. Well, let's also keep in mind January and try to work something, a video kind of experience. I'm very intrigued with that possibility.
I would love to do that. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing everything. I'll make sure, but tell everyone where they can find more out about you.
Yeah, the two websites. The website for our programs is kinderinstitute.com, and the website for just kind of playing with life planning, and it's a free consumer site, is lifeplanningforyou.com. And you can also search Amazon for my books. I've written many.
Yes, you have. They're awesome, and they're going to keep coming.
Yeah, they are.
Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Bye-bye.